Brayden West didn't expect the scent of motor oil and burnt rubber to be the backdrop to the woman who would change everything. The sun glared off the hood of his matte black Aston Martin as he pulled into the corner auto shop, the low rumble of the engine drawing glances. He hated waiting, but his assistant had begged him to get the tire pressure checked personally after a sensor started blinking. Something about the car not being replaceable. He parked, stepped out, and immediately bumped into someone rounding the corner. "Oh hell," a woman's voice snapped as she stumbled back. Brayden caught her arm before she hit the ground. "Are you okay?" She looked up, eyes sharp and narrowed not with fear but pure irritation. "Yeah. Just trying to dodge luxury vehicles that apparently don't see other people." Brayden blinked. She wasn't like the women he usually met, no fake smile, no soft voice pretending not to be mad. She was real. Dust on her jeans, a grease stain on her worn gray t-shirt, and a wrench in her hand. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, a smudge of oil across her cheek. She looked furious and beautiful. "You work here?" he asked. "No," she deadpanned. "I just like crawling under cars for fun." Brayden laughed before he could stop himself. "All right. Fair enough." The woman rolled her eyes and started walking off toward one of the garage bays. Without even thinking, he followed. "I'm Brayden." She didn't stop moving. "Don't care." Most people do. She spun back around, wiping her hands on a towel. "Well, Brayden, I've had a long day of chasing a leaking radiator. The AC in the waiting room's broken, and I skipped lunch. So unless you're here to help me replace a timing belt, I'm really not in the mood for small talk." He held up his hands. "I just need my tires checked." She squinted at his car. "You could afford a new car before a single tire goes flat. I like this one." "Shocking," he smiled again. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Ariella Rhodes." She turned and headed back toward the car. Brayden watched her, more curious than before. She wasn't impressed by his watch, his car, or his name. In fact, she looked like she couldn't care less. It was refreshing. He leaned against the wall as she crouched by the front tire, checking the pressure. "So, Ariella," he said after a moment, "do you treat all your customers like this or just the lucky ones?" She looked up at him, one eyebrow raised. "Just the ones who almost body-checked me with a $200,000 car." "Fair." Ariella stood, brushing off her hands. "Your front left's a bit low. Pull it into bay 2, I'll fix it up." He did as she said, parking the car carefully inside. She was already rolling the compressor over, her sleeves pushed up. She looked completely in control, focused, fast, confident. He cleared his throat. "You own this place?" "No," she said. "My uncle does. I manage it while he's in Florida. Retirement life." "Do you like it?" She looked at him, really looked at him this time. Her eyes were a warm hazel but guarded. "It's work. It's honest. It pays the bills." That answer stirred something in him. He was used to people who worked their jobs for networking, for positioning, for the next ladder rung. Not because it was real. As she topped off the air and removed the hose, she glanced at him again. "You can go now." He tilted his head. "You're not gonna try to upsell me a fuel treatment or something? I'm not a scam artist. And yet you're letting me walk out without paying." Ariella grabbed a clipboard and scribbled something. "You can pay at the front or don't. I'm not chasing you down." Brayden stepped closer. "How about I take you to dinner instead?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What? Dinner? You skipped lunch, remember? And now you want to feed me. Is that so shocking?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "You look like the kind of guy who orders $1,000 wine and doesn't remember the waitress's name." Brayden didn't know whether to be offended or impressed. "You're not wrong, but maybe I'm trying something different." She eyed him for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Dead," Ariella exhaled, biting her lip for a second. "Fine, one dinner, but I pick the place. Deal." She wrote something on the clipboard again and ripped the page off, handing it to him. "That's the address, tomorrow, 7. Don't wear anything that looks like it belongs on a yacht." He looked down at the paper and then back at her. "You always this charming, only when I'm wildly unimpressed." As he walked back to his car, he grinned to himself. He didn't know what it was about her. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch at his wealth, or the way she met him head-on, no games. But something about Ariella Rhodes had already stuck in his mind. And Brayden West, millionaire venture capitalist and one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors, had just agreed to have dinner in a part of town he hadn't set foot in since college because a woman with oil-stained hands and a sharp tongue had told him to. He didn't know it yet. But that dinner would change everything. The place Ariella picked wasn't in any of Brayden's bookmarked restaurant lists or luxury dining apps. It was a narrow storefront tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, its windows fogged with steam and the scent of garlic and rosemary wafting through the cracked door. No valet, no maitre d', no menu with embossed gold. Just a hand-painted sign above the door that read, Lewis's. He stepped inside, ducking slightly under the low doorway. The warmth hit him immediately, aromas of baking bread, simmering sauces, and something sweet he couldn't quite place. The lighting was dim, the walls lined with mismatched frames and family photos, and the hum of conversation was low and familiar. Ariella waved from a booth in the corner, a glass of something pale in front of her. She was wearing a deep blue flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves and jeans that had seen better days. Her hair was down, wavy and loose, and he noticed for the first time that it wasn't just brown, it had strands of auburn when it caught the light. He slid into the seat across from her. "You actually showed. I always keep my word," Brayden said, glancing around. "This place smells incredible. They make everything from scratch. Lewisa still comes in at dawn to prep the sauces herself. Don't expect any foam or edible flowers, though. I'll survive." A server appeared, dropping off a bottle of wine and 2 plates of warm focaccia without needing to ask. Ariella poured him a glass. "You're not allergic to anything, are you? Only to pretentious menus. Good. Then you'll live." He took a sip of the wine. "You come here often, twice a week. My mom used to bring me here when I was a kid. Lewisa still remembers how I liked my pasta cut smaller so I didn't splash sauce on myself." Brayden leaned forward, elbows resting casually on the table. "You grew up around here, born 3 blocks from here, still live in the same apartment building. Rent-controlled, I'm not giving that up for anything," he nodded, impressed. "That's rare. Most people I know would have sold out and moved uptown." "Yeah, well, most people you know probably never had to count quarters to buy milk." The sudden sharpness in her voice caught him by surprise. She wasn't being cruel, just honest. He set his glass down. "You always this straightforward? Only when someone asks questions they aren't ready for the answers to. I can handle it." She studied him for a moment, then picked up a piece of bread and tore it in half. "All right, your turn. For what? Where you're from, what you do." "You know basic human information," he leaned back. "I grew up in Seattle. Dad worked construction, Mom was a nurse, came to New York for college, stayed for the chaos." She raised an eyebrow. "And now," he hesitated, "I invest in things. That's vague. I like it that way. Fine." "Fortune teller then," he laughed, and the tension between them eased. "I built a company that funds startups. Tech mostly, health systems, logistics, sustainable energy, boring stuff until it makes someone a fortune." "And does it make you a fortune?" He didn't answer. Just took another sip of wine. "Thought so," she muttered, but there was no resentment in her voice, just curiosity edged with something else. Caution, maybe. A waitress brought over 2 steaming plates. Ariella had ordered for both of them rigatoni with vodka sauce and something he couldn't pronounce but immediately wanted to devour. He took a bite and blinked. "This is amazing, right? I've eaten at places with Michelin stars that couldn't touch this." "You know why it's better?" she asked, twirling her fork. "Because Lewisa still cooks like she's feeding her family, not critics." Brayden looked at her, really looked. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to sell anything. She was just there, unfiltered. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel the need to be anyone but himself. "Why did you say yes to dinner?" he asked, voice low. Ariella didn't answer right away. She chewed, swallowed, then met his gaze. "Because you looked like someone who's forgotten what real life feels like." He blinked. Excuse me. You walk like you haven't stood in a grocery line in a decade. You talk like every word's been rehearsed. And you looked at me like I was speaking a language you hadn't heard in years. Brayden sat back, stunned, not by her words, by how right she was. I guess I needed the reminder, he said quietly. Glad to help. They ate in silence for a while, the clinking of dishes and the murmur of nearby tables filling the space between them. Eventually, Ariella pushed her plate aside and leaned her chin on her hand. Tell me something you've never told anyone, she said. He blinked. That's a bold request. You look like someone who needs to say something out loud, something that doesn't end in a press release. He stared at her, unsure why he felt the urge to answer. Maybe it was the way she didn't lean forward, didn't press, just waited. I used to write music, he said slowly. Back in college, thought I'd make a career out of it. Then I sold a software patent and everything changed. Why'd you stop? You can't write lyrics when your brain is full of quarterly reports. Ariella tilted her head. That's a shame. Why? Because people who create things shouldn't stop just because they got good at something else. He didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever said something like that to him. Most people only cared about what he was building next, not what he'd left behind. When the check came, Ariella reached for it. He caught her hand before she could. My treat. I invited you. You fed me the best meal I've had in months. Let me pay. She hesitated, then pulled her hand back. Fine, but next time's mine. His chest tightened slightly at the words, next time. Outside, the air was cool, the city buzzing around them. Ariella wrapped her arms around herself, and without thinking, he shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, surprised. You know this thing probably costs more than my car, right? Then take care of it. He hailed a cab, and they stood there in silence as it pulled up. She turned to him, one hand still clutching the lapel of his jacket. I don't do games, she said. Neither do I. She nodded once, then climbed into the cab. He watched it drive away, the feeling in his chest unfamiliar and heavy. Brayden West had just had dinner in a place with flickering light bulbs and peeling paint, and he'd never felt more grounded in his life. He didn't know what came next, but he knew one thing: he wanted to see her again. Brayden stepped into his penthouse and tossed his keys on the marble counter, but for once, the silence didn't soothe him. The city skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering with the kind of promise people spent lifetimes chasing. Normally, he'd pour a bourbon, skim through emails, and lose himself in the machinery of his empire. But tonight, he stood still, jacketless, thinking about a woman who'd told him he walked like he didn't know how to wait in line. He glanced toward the piano in the corner, untouched for nearly 6 years, and then back at the door. The next morning, his routine broke again. Instead of heading to the office, Brayden rerouted his driver to the shop. Not to see Ariella, he told himself, but to ask about getting his oil changed. That was something people did. Right, when he got there, the garage was already humming. Engines roared, tools clanked, and a radio played an old blues track that somehow fit the chaos. Ariella wasn't in sight. A younger guy in coveralls greeted him at the entrance. You need something? The guy asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I was hoping to talk to Ariella. She's not in yet. Mondays she opens late. She's got a standing appointment. Brayden frowned. Appointment, the guy shrugged. Some community center thing. She teaches girls how to work on cars, like a skills workshop or something. Brayden blinked, thrown by the last part. She teaches. Yeah, volunteer. Every week. That hit him harder than expected. He nodded his thanks and returned to the car, giving his driver a new address, the community center the mechanic had mentioned. If she didn't want him there, she'd say so. But something about the way she moved through the world, self-assured, unfiltered, had him curious in a way he couldn't shake. At the center, he waited in the parking lot until he saw her hair twisted up, grease on her cheek again, jacket tied around her waist, laughing with a teenage girl holding a socket wrench. The girl was mimicking something Ariella had just demonstrated, and when she got it right, Ariella bumped her shoulder playfully. Brayden stayed in the car longer than he meant to. Eventually, she noticed him. She didn't wave, didn't smile. Just walked straight to the passenger side and tapped on the window. He rolled it down. "You stalking me now? I prefer surprise visits." She folded her arms. "You surprise visited a community center. I was at the shop. They said you weren't in. I asked why. They told me." Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you really here?" "I wanted to see you again." Ariella leaned against the car door. "You know what most guys would have done after dinner? I can guess. They would have ghosted. Or worse, sent flowers with a note that said something like thanks for the realness. That bad. You'd be surprised how many hedge fund guys think a single meal in my neighborhood counts as street cred." Brayden opened the door and stepped out. "I'm not here for street cred or flowers. Or whatever else you think I'm trying to prove. Then what are you here for? Something honest." Ariella stared at him for a long moment, then jerked her head toward the building. "You want honest? Come inside." He followed her through the front doors and down a hallway that smelled faintly of paint and old linoleum. The classroom was a converted garage, a beat-up sedan lifted on jacks in the center. 4 teenage girls stood around it, each holding a different tool. Ariella turned to them. "Ladies, this is Brayden. He thinks he can help." "I didn't say that. You're holding a wrench now. Congratulations." She tossed him a tool and pointed to the car. "Let's see how long you last." The girls giggled, clearly amused by the way he stared at the vehicle like it might explode. He rolled up his sleeves and stepped closer. An hour later, his hands were filthy, his shirt was stained, and his watch had a scratch he didn't want to think about. But he was still there, holding a flashlight while one of the girls replaced a filter Ariella had shown her how to remove. "You're not terrible," Ariella said, crouching beside him. "I'm a fast learner." She tilted her head. "You ever done anything like this before?" "No," he paused, "but I've broken things. This feels like the opposite." She looked at him strangely but didn't push. When the class ended, she waved goodbye to the girls and walked with him outside. "You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to." Ariella studied him, the edge in her expression softening slightly. "Most people don't bother with this part of me." "What part?" "The one that fixes things because no one else will." Brayden leaned against the wall near her. "You said you don't play games, neither do I, so I'm going to ask you something and I want the truth." "Okay, are you okay with this?" "With me showing up, with whatever this is turning into?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "It scares me a little," he nodded. "Me too." She turned to him slowly, something flickering behind her eyes. "I've built my life to run without anyone else's engine. You show up and suddenly everything's shifting. Then let it shift." Ariella stepped closer. "And if it crashes," he didn't hesitate, "then we rebuild." The air between them changed, not charged, not heated, just real, like something solid was starting to take shape. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. "I don't normally do this, but I want to see you again, on my terms this time. I'm listening. There's a block party this weekend. The shop sponsors it. Food, music. Nothing fancy. I'm in. Don't wear anything dry, clean only." He smiled. "Noted." She turned to go but paused. "You surprised me today." "How so?" "You didn't flinch when you got your hands dirty." He met her gaze. "Maybe I've been clean too long." And just like that, she walked away, leaving him in the parking lot with oil under his fingernails and something new twisting in his chest. For the first time in years, Brayden West wasn't thinking about numbers or deals or his next acquisition. He was thinking about her. The scent of grilled corn and slow roasted ribs clung to the air as Brayden stepped onto the blocked-off street, the late afternoon sun casting a golden haze over the crowd. Children darted between folding tables, music floated from a speaker set up near the sidewalk, and laughter rolled from backyard gates propped open with bricks. He wore dark jeans and a navy t-shirt, both of which he'd bought that morning from a shop he'd never have entered a month ago. The Rolex on his wrist was the only giveaway he hadn't thought to swap it out. "Didn't think you'd actually show," Ariella said, appearing beside a table of lemonade pitchers. She wore a sleeveless top and cut-off denim shorts, her hair braided loosely down one shoulder, a streak of grease still faintly visible on her forearm. I told you I would. She handed him a plastic cup. No champagne here. Hope your palate can handle citrus powder and tap water. Nostalgia has flavor, he said, taking a sip. It's tangy. Her gaze lingered on his shirt. You look almost normal, he laughed. Careful. I might get used to this. Ariella led him through the crowd, stopping every few feet to greet someone by name. It struck him how many people knew her, how easily she belonged. It wasn't just her neighborhood, it was her world. She wasn't trying to prove herself in it, she already had. You okay? She asked, glancing at him as they stopped beside a booth manned by a group of high schoolers selling car air fresheners shaped like tiny wrenches. I'm fine. Just watching what? You. Ariella raised an eyebrow but didn't deflect. You're not used to people like this, are you? I'm not used to people who don't want something from me. You think I don't, he didn't answer immediately. I think you don't need anything from me. That's different. She didn't respond, but her fingers brushed his as they walked, a small touch that startled him with how natural it felt. An older woman with a wide-brimmed hat waved Ariella over. You bringing that pretty boy to the engine raffle, or is he just decoration? Brayden opened his mouth to respond, but Ariella cut in. He's still in training, handles tools like they're made of glass. Then he's just right for the job, the woman laughed, disappearing into the crowd again. Do I get to know what the engine raffle is? Brayden asked. Ariella handed him a folded slip. You'll see. They made their way to a makeshift stage near the center of the block. A speaker crackled before a man in a tool belt stepped up and called for attention. All right, folks, it's that time. Every year, we raffle off a full engine rebuild labor-free, parts donated by the shop. This year's winner gets their car brought back to life, no charge. Brayden leaned toward her. You do this every year, my uncle started it. We kept it going, and you just give it away. Sometimes people need a break, she said simply. The man on stage reached into the box and pulled out a ticket. Number 208. A cheer erupted from a group near the back, and Brayden watched as a young woman in a faded hoodie stepped forward, her eyes wide. She clutched a baby to her chest and looked like she might cry. Ariella was already moving, wrapping an arm around her shoulder, guiding her toward the stage. The crowd clapped, and someone handed over the winning slip with a grin. Brayden stayed still, watching, not the spectacle, the heart of it. When Ariella returned, he asked gently, Do you know her? She came in last month. Her car broke down on the way to a job interview. She walked 2 miles with a 6-month-old in 90-degree heat. Did she get the job? She starts Monday. He didn't speak. He couldn't, not for a moment. Later, as the sun dipped low and the music shifted to soft soul, Ariella led him to the stoop of a brownstone just off the main stretch. They sat in silence for a while, the buzz of the block party fading behind them. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking, dangerous. He turned toward her. You've built something real here, something that matters. Her shoulders lifted in a half shrug. It's just a neighborhood. No, he said, it's yours, and that means more than anything I've built in glass towers. Ariella glanced at him, and for the first time she looked unsure. What happens now? He reached for her hand. You told me once that you built your life to run without anyone else's engine, but what if we built something together? She didn't pull away. I have a lot of things, he continued. More money than I know what to do with, more properties than I've ever slept in, more people pretending to like me than I can count. But I don't have this. I don't have you. Ariella's voice was low. You don't even know what I come with. I've got rust and old wounds and people who depend on me. I can't be someone you visit when you're bored of penthouses. You're not a detour, he said. You're the first place I've wanted to stay. She looked at him for a long time, then stood and pulled him up. I'm not promising anything easy. I'm not asking for easy. Ariella stepped closer, her fingers curling around the collar of his shirt. Then don't let go. He kissed her on that stoop, the kind of kiss that wasn't about heat or hunger but understanding. It was steady, real. And when they pulled apart, the world hadn't changed, but something between them had. Brayden didn't go back to his penthouse that night. He walked her home, stayed until the streetlights blinked out and left with oil still on his hands, and her number saved in his phone under her full name, because she wasn't a type she was a once-in-a-lifetime. 6 months later, the shop had a new co-owner. She didn't change the sign. He didn't need his name on it, but every Saturday after closing, she'd find a note taped to the register. A line of lyrics, a joke only she'd get, or a reservation for 2 at whatever place she still insisted on picking. And every time she'd shake her head, pretend to be annoyed and smile all the way home. Because sometimes the bump that knocks you off course ends up being the beginning of everything. The wind rolled off the Hudson in brisk gusts as Brayden stood beside Ariella, beneath a string of hanging lights that swayed above the rooftop of the refurbished brick building she'd spent the last 3 months quietly transforming. The new garage hers. Theirs had opened 2 weeks ago in a part of town where people didn't expect help, let alone honesty. And yet, the line of customers already wrapped around the block most mornings, drawn in by word of mouth and the woman who'd once rebuilt her entire life with a wrench and a refusal to quit. Brayden adjusted the collar of his jacket, casting a glance at the modest sign glowing behind them, Rhodes and West Auto Collective, painted in deep navy with gold trim, chosen by Ariella because it looked strong without trying too hard. He hadn't argued. He rarely did anymore, not when it came to things that mattered to her. "You're nervous," Ariella said, leaning against the railing, her arms crossed loosely, eyes on the skyline. "I don't get nervous. You've twisted your watch band 3 times in the last 5 minutes. He glanced down at the leather strap, then let his hands fall to his sides. "All right, maybe a little." Ariella turned to face him fully. "Is this about tonight?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I have the charity gala at the Langford. I'm supposed to present the innovation grant. It's black tie, cameras, the whole thing. I know, you've mentioned it, twice. They're expecting me to arrive with someone." She stayed quiet. He stepped closer. "I want you to come." Ariella's brows lifted. "To the Langford with you?" "Yes, Brayden, I don't own a dress that doesn't have a grease stain, and the last time I was in a room with that many rich people, I was fixing the caterer's van out back. I took care of the dress." She stared at him. "You what?" He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a slim envelope. "I had it made. Nothing flashy. I worked with Eva from the community center, the one who used to design for that fashion house before she moved back here to take care of her brother. She helped." Ariella took the envelope, opened it, and pulled out a photo of a deep emerald gown, simple and graceful, with a high neckline and a slit that hinted without shouting. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "You are. I just wanted something that wouldn't try to outshine you." She looked up at him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "You're sure you want me there?" "With your people. They stopped being my people the day I walked into your uncle's garage." Ariella folded the paper and tucked it carefully into her back pocket. "Then I guess I'd better find shoes." Later that evening, when she stepped into the Langford ballroom with her hand in Brayden's, the room didn't fall silent or gasp dramatically, but heads turned. Not because of the dress or the man beside her, but because Ariella carried herself like someone who didn't need to belong to anyone's world to matter in it. Brayden introduced her without hesitation, without softening her story. He spoke of her work, her impact, the rebuilt engines and the rebuilt lives. He didn't hide her. He celebrated her. The evening passed in a blur of crystal chandeliers and champagne, but the moment that stayed with her was when Brayden stepped up to the microphone and, instead of launching into his prepared speech, folded the paper and set it aside. "I was supposed to talk about innovation tonight," he said. "About disruption and investment and progress. But none of that means anything if it doesn't change lives." He looked directly at Ariella. "The smartest investment I've ever made wasn't in a company. It was in a woman who reminds me every day that fixing something broken takes more courage than building something new. She taught me that grit matters more than polish, that generosity doesn't need a platform, and that love doesn't have to be comfortable to be real." The room went still. Ariella's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Her breath caught. Brayden stepped down, crossed the floor, and stopped in front of her. "I love you," he said, not quietly. "I love everything you are and everything you refuse to pretend to be. I love who I am when I'm with you. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to deserve you." People began to murmur, some smiling, others watching with open curiosity. Ariella didn't care. She stepped into him, framed his face with her hands, and kissed him like no one was watching. Afterward, they slipped out early, shoes in hand, the city swelling around them like a secret. They didn't go back to the penthouse. They went home. To her apartment, still above the same corner store, though now with freshly painted walls and a second bedroom filled with tools and half-finished sketches for a mentorship program they were launching together. Ariella peeled off the dress and hung it carefully, then joined Brayden on the couch, where he handed her a mug of tea he'd made from a blend they'd picked up at a street market 2 weeks earlier. "You know," she said, curling her legs under her, "I never imagined this. That makes 2 of us. I used to think love was something you had to earn by being easy, quiet, convenient. What changed? You didn't flinch when I showed you the hard parts." He kissed her temple. "They're the best parts." Spring turned to summer. The shop grew, the mentorship program launched, and Brayden proposed one morning in the garage. No flash, no photographers. Just her name written across a custom-built license plate, and a ring hidden inside the glove box of the first car they'd rebuilt together. She said yes with oil on her hands and tears on her cheeks. They married in the same neighborhood where they met. The street was shut down for the day, the tables filled with neighbors, former students, and grease-streaked toddlers running between folding chairs. Ariella walked down the aisle in a dress that still had a faint burn mark where she'd accidentally grazed it with a soldering iron. Brayden wore his old boots with his tailored suit. There were no luxury yachts or sweeping staircases. Just laughter, good food, and love that felt earned. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped low and music floated over the rooftops, Ariella leaned into him and whispered, "You still walk like you have somewhere important to be." He smiled. "I do, home. With you." And that night, in the same bed where they'd first said "I love you" with the windows open and the city humming below, they fell asleep wrapped around each other, no distance left to close. Everything they needed was already there together.